Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our weekly webcast looking at vulnerabilities from the Virsec Security Lab, our weekly vulnerability analysis. Joined, as always, by Satya Gupta, our founder and CTO. Hello, Satya. How did this week go?
Very good, Billy. How are you? How are you doing?
Good. So we have our usual list of the top vulnerabilities that your team has found. So why don't we jump right into the analysis?
Absolutely. So this week, we came up with the national vulnerability kind of accounts for 315 vulnerabilities. It's a relatively lighter week, but we picked 6 high impact ones, and there's actually very serious ones this week. So this is going to be a fun week, essentially. And of course, we are reporting for the week that went from 25th January to 31st January 2021. So
and
as
just
usual,
for the audience reminder, we publish the full report on this every week, and we do individual blog posts. So if you haven't, please look for those. They'll come out in a few days.
Great. And so, we picked 5 regular ones and one, confused deputy, which is the Ibm Qradar. So let me dive right into the very first one, which is the IBM WebSphere application server. So this is a very common web framework, and lots of people use it to host their enterprise applications in it. And this the framework itself has external XML entity attackable. It's Xsx injection is possible in there. And it could very often Xsx attacks will take will cause denial of service kind of attacks, essentially. But this one is just consumes a whole bunch of memory. So what happens is you probably remember there's a billion laugh vulnerability that came out about I would say about 6 to 8 months ago. So it's kind of a recursive. It keeps on the XML interpreter keeps on recursively opening more and more XML files, essentially. So it just gets caught in a loop, and it does at some point the process starting to do run out of gas, essentially.
And Satya, just a quick question on our own terminology on our dashboard. And I know we've talked about this before, but attack complexity being read means it's not very complex for attackers to break in.
That's right. It's easy to recreate and all, and it's not very complex. Like SolarWinds, it had a lot of complexity in it. This one is a straightforward. You send it a packet and it gets hit.
Okay, and then user interaction also means that if it's bad, it does not require user interaction, right?
Yes. So if you're thinking of a server that's running in a data center, there's no user out there, right? So if there is user interaction required, then you really can't exploit that vulnerability, pretty much.
Right. Okay.
And so because this is a pretty heavily used application, it becomes important by itself. The Xsx has relatively, it kind of creates denial of service. So it affects an enterprise's application would go sort of for a toss. You'll get a denial of service kind of a situation out there. So it's really more about business disruption than an exploitation, perhaps. And so VSP APG can actually protect against these Xsx style attacks. So we are really covered if the WebSphere could have been protected against these kind of attacks, essentially.
And the APG is essentially the web gateway that's built into our product?
Yes, exactly. So it inspects the traffic that's coming in, and it can detect that an attempt at Xsx is being performed there.
Okay, so next we have Apache again, seems to make the list almost every week.
Yes, Apache Druid is a little bit like a data ingestion engine. It basically accepts event-driven data, and it you can write analytics on top of it to be able to make sense of what just happened in those events, essentially. And so this one has a remote code execution vulnerability. So all your data could be at risk, essentially. Because just like SolarWinds, somebody could take over this particular box and destroy all your data that you may have collected over a very long period of time.
And I know we say this every week, but remote code execution has become such a large problem, and not many products other than ours really address it while it's executing.
Yes, and it's very important to arrest remote code execution in the infiltration stage, because if you let it sit there beyond that, then who knows what else can happen essentially. The attack, you're at the mercy of the attacker. It's like leaving the door open, and so the bad guy gets in, and who knows what they'll do next.
And with SolarWinds, I know we've talked about there are a lot of RCE steps that open back doors in various places, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So with this, fortunately, the VSP web and VSP host can keep your servers safe and your workload safe. So that's the good news out there. Fortunately, there's no public domain exploit available, but that doesn't mean somebody doesn't have it. It just means that it's not out in the public.
Okay.
My third pick is the Rsa Archer. It has a stored XSS vulnerability in it. Rsa Archer is a pretty common, is a very popular product. It is used to monitor and manage your risks and create workflows, that are pertinent to that particular, set of activities that are being monitored. And so this is used by larger corporations. Pretty much every large corporation will have used this product, Rsa Archer, to manage their risk, enterprise risk, essentially.
So it's one of those very widespread products in a way like SolarWinds that is used by many, many companies. It's in the background.
Right. It's very expensive, but it's used by pretty much every Fortune 500 company. And it's like a favorite it's in the magic quadrant of, it has a very high rating inside the Gartner magic quadrant. So, it's a very favorite GRC / IRM tool, essentially.
Right.
And so there's a very large slew of, we've kind of tracked who are some of the users of Rsa Archer, and you can see some really big names show up out here.
Right. Okay.
And fortunately,
capabilities can take care of this kind of XSS attack.
Exactly. So the Xsx attack is basically on end users. So imagine I'm trying to get a handle on the risk of my enterprise, and I get attacked myself. That's not very good, right? So as a user, if I get attacked, that's that kind of reduces the how should I say it? It's like it's almost like a confused deputy kind of a thing. Somebody who's supposed to manage your risk itself is not being able to keep you safe. That's not a very desirable outcome here.
Sure. So it's not frontline security, but it is part of the security program of many companies.
Exactly. And XSS is a very nasty attack on personal endpoints. As on the other side of the browser, if I get attacked, I can, it can be used to install rootkits and a whole bunch of bad things on my personal machine, which will ultimately lead to, so people who are working with Rsa Archer are also people who are in a privileged position in that company, perhaps for the most part. And so, those people who get attacked with their rootkits on their machines, they have highly privileged access in the rest of the network. So you pretty much is the first step in stealing credentials, essentially.
Stealing the most valuable credentials, right?
Exactly. Again, with Virsec, our VSP web capability can stop these stored XSS kind of attack. These are really nasty as opposed to reflected XSS, because it's a two asynchronous operation. The attacker basically stores the the JavaScript, and then sometime later, several days later, whoever visits that particular page or looks up that particular page on Rsa Archer may get infected unwittingly. So it's not like somebody sent you a phishing link and all that you can, if you click on it, you get hammered. But it's something that I could bury inside, and everybody who comes to the site out there will get attacked, essentially. It's like a spray and pray kind of situation out here.
All right. Now, SUDO, I know this is a very widely used utility in Linux, right? So
exactly.
This one seems particularly alarming.
Exactly. So this capability is, there's a utility called sudo edit. When you run that particular capability as logged in as a low privileged user, it'll flip you into a high privileged user. So this is a really nasty problem because, as bumping up your privilege in a kill chain is a really important aspect of the overall kill chain. So in a sense,
just to clarify, the purpose of this utility is to elevate privileges, right?
Yes, and
It's
that
kind of the
when
ultimate tool for a hacker to compromise.
exactly. I mean, if this is like I'd be salivating. I'm expecting that this is going to be causing ripples, very soon, essentially.
Yeah.
And we'll be showing you a video also on this. So watch out for that.
Yeah, we'll have that out early next week. And there is a publicly available exploit, I guess we've
There
used.
is absolutely. So this that makes it even more dangerous because this utility comes bundled with the kernel, with the OS distribution, and it's been it goes back many years, and it's in every Linux distribution. So millions and millions of machines out there or servers are vulnerable in one fell swoop.
I know, Satya, we've talked about maybe soon adding another metric of the length of time and whatever days, months, or years that these vulnerabilities have existed.
Right.
And that times the, how widespread it is, I think
Yeah.
put a name on that.
So if you think about it, you're really dating the vulnerability. You see many of these vulnerabilities that go back and fix things that were built 7, 8, 10 years ago. So, it's only now that, just like with the SolarWinds case, the attackers became greedy and they changed somebody's phone number on a two-factor authentication, channel essentially. And that's how they got detected. If they had not done that, they could have persisted for a very long time. Right. So, at some point, the attacker gets a little cocky and, they'll release something that they shouldn't have done and all that, and they'll get caught. But, so it doesn't mean that people have not been exploiting those things for a while.
Right.
So the base underlying vulnerability had been exploited 15 months ago, very. So in September 2019, they were in the SolarWinds, environment. So this is the power of unknown vulnerability. Just because it got, reported today, it doesn't mean that it wasn't a threat for the last so many
someone
years.
else didn't figure it out, right? Of course.
Yes, exactly. And so my fifth vulnerability for the week is in a language, the Golang. It has a command injection vulnerability that would lead into an RCE attack. So this is particularly nasty because Golang is the language of choice for many large corporations, and it's actually very it's supposed to be the safer version of C++.
Okay.
And so it should not really be, and the large corporation, it's a very preferred language within Google, particularly. So, this having a nasty command injection vulnerability that can lead to an RCE would basically compromise the box on which this product is running, essentially.
Wow.
And so, as you can, as you can see, the user,
the language.
right? If you have users like it's kind of used to is used by many of these customers and many products that each one of these products is very, very popular by itself.
Sure.
So you kind of
millions of users. Yeah.
Yes, and that's what makes this particular vulnerability very nasty. And again, because it's a command injection vulnerability, and that leads to RC, our VSP web and our VSP host capability would have protected against these vulnerabilities.
Okay.
So my last pick, this is my confused deputy pick of the week. This is about the IBM Qradar Sim. So as you know, SIM is supposed to be an aggregator, and it helps find those needles in haystacks and all. When you get attacked, SIM is what launches those protection actions and all to save you in time and all that. But if the SIM itself can be corrupted, then it's a really serious problem. And this one is a Java deserialization attack. It is a very nasty problem because the attacker was able to send some Java code in their HTTP input, essentially. And they made the request. That request contained some Java code in it. So that makes it very, very nasty. And as you can see that, it can lead up to an RCE. And RCEs can, as we all have discovered this in the last few days, thanks to SolarWinds, that everything downstream of it can be completely compromised.
So since this is in the security process, of course, there's concern that they could mask security incidents. But
Exactly.
if it's an RCE, it almost doesn't matter what it is affecting, right?
Yeah, exactly.
or open
I mean,
about.
we saw with the SolarWinds attack, they were using they used the RC in the Exchange server, and then they were able to access Exchange, people's emails and all, and then they phished, the users out there. But here's another nasty problem. If you have an attack, an ongoing attack, and if the SIM is sort of has turned a blind eye to it, then the attacker can persist. If I were an attacker, that's what I would do. If I wanted to steal something from an organization, I would actually bury the SIM, and then I can persist for a longer time. It just increases the dwell time substantially.
Okay. And how does Virsec address this?
So with Virsec, as you remember, this is it's an HTTP request. We actually are able to trace it through our VSP web module and our VSP host module. It basically, the notification that there's a deserialization attack going on gets populated by the VSP web, and the VSP host protects malicious actions from taking place. If the Java code start doing anything nasty or starts new processes and all, it'll actually get arrested by our VSP host capability.
Okay, all right, Satya. Another very thorough week, and we will continue this next week. As I said, we'll publish the report. You can find those on our website, and we'll be publishing blogs. Any other thoughts, Satya? I know SolarWinds still is just such a ongoing story, not because of the one event, but because of what it implies or what the implications are for supply chains or elsewhere.
Right.
Any last thoughts on that?
Yeah, so if you think about it, in a typical data center, you have many services, email, authentication, DNS, NTP, various kinds of services. So any vendor who's your supplier for those services will have, if they get attacked, they have an RC in their own environment. Then this whole SolarWinds saga will repeat itself with just another name. Switching names out there from SolarWinds to somebody else and all, and so this is just sort of a bad omen. It's bringing some new light. Why we should protect ourselves against these RCs, because this is not going to be the last attack here that you'd be hearing about.
Also raising a lot more discussion of this term zero trust, which I know has been around for a few years, mostly referring to users and access controls, but taking zero trust down to the runtime level or the workload level.
Exactly.
A new need.
It's at the end of the day, your applications are facing the attackers essentially. That's the first doorway the attackers arrive in. So if your if your application is not cannot be is vulnerable, then doing all of those other things that we talk about in zero trust model, they're protecting the users and devices and all, is kind of moot. Right?
Yeah, that's a very good point. We think of users as being the front line to networks or devices, but now with applications often being on the front line, it's we've got to take those same principles and we've got to build them into the application.
Exactly. I mean, a large part of the user and device management is on the Active Directory or some such directory server. Now, imagine if I were able to break into your premise and, if your application was running with admin rights, I could take over the Active Directory anyway.
Right. Sure.
So I could totally disable your zero trust model. It's like step one in the journey is protecting your applications. Out of all of those 4 blocks that we see in the zero trust model, the application, the workload, the user, the devices, I would say the application is the most important thing, and that we need to be able to protect in the zero trust paradigm.
All right, well, I think we'll leave it at that, Satya. Lots to think about, and we'll be talking a lot more about zero trust in the next few weeks. And of course, we'll continue to monitor what's happening in the world of vulnerabilities and attacks. So thank you, Satya, and thank you to the audience, and we will talk to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Willie.